My name is Bob Plank. I'm a 1971 graduate of the Hilton College. That was back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And actually the very first class of the college. If you look out there at that picture in the lobby of all the students of the first section of the first class, I was the tall, ugly one in the back. So it's my pleasure to welcome our introducer and our speaker today. This series is sponsored by Eric's Club. Eric's Club is a group of volunteers and alumni that to be a member you need to be a C-level executive in a business or a business owner and have been out of the college at least 20 years. So we have a lot of those people here. If you're a member of Eric's Club, would you raise your hand so they can see you? So we're lucky to have all these leaders in our industry with us. And the Eric's Club also sponsors several scholarships and other activities here at the college. We do a gourmet night scholarship for a member of the executive staff, and we just initiated a rising senior scholarship as well that's been sponsored by Eric's Club. Our first speaker, the introducer of our speaker, Jonathan Scherer, was our last lecturer, and every 6 months we have a lecturer from among the members of Eric's Club, and Jonathan Scherer is here to introduce Sharmagne. Jonathan?
As Bob said, my name's Jonathan Scherer. I'm the general manager of the Bowel Club here in town. 1980 graduate, so I'm not the dinosaur he is. But today we're going to talk about this lady, Sharmagne Taylor. I think you're going to find it to be an interesting hospitality journey. I would like to welcome all of you, Eric's Club people, the deans here. I think you're going to be entertained. Sharmagne started her career running around the country with her mom after her sister bailed and went to college. And she got all kinds of exposure to the hospitality business. Various cities, like the Muhlenbach Hotel in Kansas City, high-end properties, and eventually her travels brought her to Houston. She had the hospitality bug, I guess, by then, and enrolled in the college, graduated in 1986, and then proceeded to work in the convention business. Boy, you talk about a dog in business. The convention business for Hyatt and Hilton for 15 years. That must have been interesting. And then after 15 years, she probably said to herself, I don't need these people to tell me what to do. I'm going to do it on my own. So she created her own company called On-Site Partners, Inc. On-Site Partners, Inc. is a very prestigious company. Is the recipient of the Houston Minority Supplier Development Council's prestigious E10 Award, the 2012 U.S. Business Administration's Directors Award, the 2008 recipient of the Houston Citizens Chamber of Commerce Pinnacle Award in the hospitality, and the 2008 Houston Minority Supplier Development Council Minority Supplier of the Year Award. She has lots of awards. I think she did something, 1986. 2003 she completed a community minority business advancement program offered by the tea sippers at the Macomb School of Business. We won't hold that against her. But she's got an interesting career and an interesting slant on the business. She helps conventions and things like that. She's going to tell you about what she does. But her best accomplishment is she's been married to Charles for 31 years. And they have 2 kids. Evan, who's a media technology and public relations professional, and Barry, who must be a full-fledged mechanical engineer by now. Kind of like my kids. My little kid's a petroleum engineer. So anyway, without further ado, Sharmagne.
Well, good morning. Of course, I am delighted to be back at my college. I do get a chance to come over here because I live in the local area quite a bit. But this day in particular is very special to me. First of all, I want to say to my fellow Eric's Club members how honored I am that you would take time out of your busy schedules to be here to support me today. It means the world to me. I also want to say a special shout out or thanks to a gentleman who will be joining us later today, and that's Dr. John Bowen. For those of you who have been at the college prior to Dean Reynolds' arrival, back in the 1980s, when I was a student here, I served as then Professor Bowen's teaching assistant. And when he returned here as the dean about 12 years ago, I became very active again on the campus. And so he and I have maintained our relationship for all of these years, and I'm sure you're going to find the same kind of relationships that you develop here at University of Houston, so I want to say hello to him. I also want to say hello to a lady who's in the back who's not going to make herself known, but I want you to know who she is, and that's Mary Douglas, who used to head the placement department here at University of Houston, and for whom we established an endowment about 5 years ago and is now giving scholarships. She has such a name that I believe without her knowing the endowment was even going to exist in the first 3 weeks, it raised the first $50,000 that it needed to raise and continued to grow. So that's a testament, Mary, to all the people that you've helped, including me. So I just wanted to say hello to you and thank you for being here, because she had to drive in from Huntsville today. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I enjoy speaking to students particularly, but I'm not really big about talking about myself. But today, I know that's my job, so I'm going to do that. And so I guess the best way to start is to start at the beginning. I was born in Orange, Texas. Does anybody know where Orange is in the Golden Triangle? Anybody here from Orange or from the Golden Triangle? Cool, I got some fellow East Texas folks in the room. So I was born in Orange, Texas. And I know we hear a lot about this today because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. But I was born and grew up at a time which was called the end of Jim Crow, which means that blacks and whites were separated, and there were no quote-unquote minorities. So growing up in East Texas, there were very limited opportunities for people of color. However, I was very fortunate, and I bring this up because you're not going to really hear rags to riches story. You may hear rags to riches back to rags, but what you're going to hear is my story. And my story includes my mom. And my mom was very fortunate that she had a father who was an entrepreneur and a mother who had the opportunity to go to college. So my grandmother graduated from college in 1942 at Prairie View A&M, which is where my son is enrolled right now. And so because my mother had that opportunity, she was a professional when I was coming up. And unfortunately in East Texas, there weren't a lot of opportunities for professional women, and particularly women of color. So we hit the road. She took a job in Cincinnati, Ohio, and because at that time she was a single mom, as a result, I went everywhere she went. Now you guys can't do that today, but they used to take me out of school to join my mother at different events and participate. And so she would leave me in the hotel, and back then the housekeepers doubled as the babysitters. And so since the housekeepers had to clean the suites and clean the rooms, then I went everywhere they went. So I remember particularly a story that John mentioned at the Hotel Mulebach, which is now Marriott in Kansas City. And I had the fortunate opportunity recently to go back and see that hotel. But I saw the suites, and they told me everyone who had stayed there. And you know, as they cleaned the suites, they gave me the history and told me a little bit about the celebrities and folks who had been in that hotel. And I didn't really think it was as they would say, creating a bug in me for that industry. But it was an exposure. And even though my parents were divorced, coincidentally, my father was a chef and worked in the wine country in California. So when I would go to visit with him, I would stay with him. He always stayed in the hotel since he was single. So I got a chance to actually view those hotels through his lens, as well as the restaurants that he worked in, and see behind the scenes. But from there, my mother's career progressed, and we lived in 7 different cities. And at the end of that journey with her, when I graduated from high school in 1980 in Nashville, Tennessee, like my friends who I just started to go to school with that year, I went to school in Tennessee. So I went to school actually in chemical engineering at Tennessee Tech University. But I have to tell you, it was before technology, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And so I went to those classes, and it was a lot of men, sort of like an Eric's Club, a lot of men. But the difference was they weren't cute. And so I wasn't all that excited about being in these classes drawing screws all day in engineering school. And I really did give it my best shot. I really did. But I just was not happy. And in the meantime, my family transferred back to Texas. And so I took a year off to try to figure out, where do I go from here? And I picked up a magazine, Black Enterprise at the time. And on the cover of that magazine were the only, at that time, 11 African American general managers in the United States. There were just 11. And I'm happy to say that in the course of my career, I was able to meet 8 of those 11. And each one of them, as I approached them as a student while in this college, was very receptive to me and willing to help me to grow. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so inspired to come back here and spend time with the students. So I enrolled in the Hilton College. And that was when I came into the dean's office. And I know Dr. Rapole was here then. And I asked the dean if I could take a couple of classes. And at that time, I wasn't enrolled as a hospitality student. I took 2 classes, fell in love, and the rest is, as they say, her story. Now, most of you, when you graduate, are going to begin to pursue your careers. And you're going to start with career. That's pretty much the way it happens now, right? Well, I met this guy, and one of the questions that I was asked to answer, because I know some of you are taking this in class, is basically tell us about how you got started in this industry. What job got you started? And if you ever made any mistakes that you wish you could take back. Well, if I had to choose something that I wouldn't have done before I graduated, it might have been getting married. But that was the best decision I ever made. And I'm so grateful that my life partner, my husband for 31 years, who's sitting in this room, was the choice that I made. It was the best mistake I ever made. And the reason why I say that is because the oil and gas industry tanked that year. Does that sound familiar to what we're dealing with right now? But it was by no stretch of the imagination. What we're experiencing today was nothing like that. I think you could get guest rooms for about $79 a night back in those days. And so there were no opportunities. Here I am graduating from the Conrad Hilton College, one of the best programs in the United States. Don't you agree? And I couldn't go to work because I had married an oil and gas man. But as the story would go on to show, that marriage and my family became my priority at that point. And because I loved this industry so much and wanted to stay engaged, I worked 5 days a week at an investment firm. You may be familiar with this person, Jonathan, I.S. Seraphim and Company. During the day, Monday through Friday, in the mailroom, with a degree in hotel and restaurant management. And on the weekends and at night, I would work at the front desk at La Quinta Motor Inn. And you know why I did that? Because I was told that you have to have experience in this industry to be able to get promoted. Now that may or may not be true for everybody, but it happened to be true for me. So I took it and I rolled with it. And as a result, I got put into that position. And down the road, I went back to that Hyatt hotel who had told me, you need to go get some experience, and took that La Quinta experience. And I said, okay, now you got to give me a job. And they did. And that job was a supervisor in reservations. Now I'm going to tell you folks, when you graduate, be open to opportunities. Just because they put you in a supervisor position or manager position, because that's all there is available at the time, it may not be commensurate with the experience that you think you have from working in this field. But I will tell you this, it's going to put you in a position to learn some very valuable lessons, which I want to share. The first is how to manage seasoned line employees. So you come out of Hilton College with your great degree, you're at the top of your game, and the first day you walk on the job and everybody is 20 years your senior. And in Houston, that's very common because the people get in a hotel and then they put down roots and shackle themselves to their chairs and never move because everybody wants to live in Houston. So I get to my first real job in the hotel business and all of my employees know way more than I do because they've been doing it for a lot longer. And so what I had to learn was to respect what it is that they bring to the table, to approach them and make them feel that I'm not coming in here trying to tell you how to do your job. What I'm trying to do is manage the work that you already do in a more efficient manner and teach you some of the things that I learned recently that might bring you up to speed. You also need to, when you're working with seasoned line employees, you need to understand that they may or may not want to advance. Most of the times, most of the time when we're in school, we talk about career advancement and career development. And for many people, that's the goal. But for some people, it's not. If you're working on the door at a hotel and you're making $75,000 a year in tips, you may not want to be an assistant manager at $40,000 a year. And I'm talking about those salaries back in those days. So you need to really understand what motivates those seasoned line employees to stay in the positions they're in, or in some cases to advance. Maybe they haven't had the opportunity that you have to have gotten that education. So it's very important to understand that. And that was one of the most important lessons I had to learn. I also had to learn how to accept feedback and work with a team. How many of us in this room like to work by themselves? Really prefer it. They love people. People are fine as long as they do what we tell them to do and we're in control, but we like to do things our own way. You got to learn how to work in a team. I never played sports, but I learned how to work in a team because team gets things done. You don't know everything. You don't know most things, but everyone in the team has some value to bring, and you have to learn to work as a team. But you also need to learn how to accept feedback. Feedback is not criticism. And you can tell when somebody's being critical and being judgmental of you. There's a difference in that and somebody who really has a vested interest in you doing a better job. Learn to be able to lend your ear to the side that can take constructive criticism in a positive way so that you can be a better you. I learned how to do that, and I'm grateful that I did. You also need to learn to pick your battles. How many protesters we got in the room? Any protesters? I'm sorry, this is not fair, this is not right, this is not fair, this is not right. You got those in the room, right? We've also got those people who will just say, you know what, I'm just not going to say anything. Maybe if I just don't say anything, it'll get better. Neither one of those things really work. What you have to do is you have to decide, what is it important for me to raise my hand about and bring to someone else's attention, and what isn't? And once you decide what that is, focus on fighting those battles till the end, because those are the battles that what? The battles that matter, okay? I'll give you just a couple of examples. When I worked for one of the two major hotel chains that were mentioned, I won't be specific because I also spent some time with Four Seasons and Harvey Hotels. But on one of those jobs that I worked for, there was a situation that occurred where someone called me a name that can't be spoken today without there being consequences. And I had a couple of choices, and this was around the same time that I made the decision to start my own business. But the choice was to fight that battle, raise holy Cain about it, or to use that opportunity to change some things. So what I'll tell you is that there was a gentleman in HR who knew that this had happened, who knew what the right course of action would be to resolve it, and he wanted to fight. And what I told him is I said to this gentleman, I said, sir, to be honest, what they said to me will not impact me. I've been hearing those words since I was a little girl and I couldn't stop to use the restroom on the road traveling with my family from place to place throughout Texas. It's okay. But if by virtue of me standing down on this issue, you will make it different for the next generation, then I'll be happy. And this HR professional who happened to be from Pasadena, who, if I believed the stereotypes, would not have been in my corner and was, did do that. And I'm happy to say that there are managers, women and minorities, in this major corporation that have gotten positions and advanced that worked with me in those days because I stood down. Because instead of me using that opportunity to fight for something for me personally, I was able to work with this HR person to change the course of their futures. And they are still in those roles in hotels today. Because I guess God had another plan for me. He had a plan for me to start my own business. And so that's when I dropped into that world in 1998. I left that hotel And in 1998, I started my own business, On-Site Partners. Now, I have to be honest with you. I never intended to open a business. But again, that oil and gas man, he came to me and he said, you know, Charmaine, I've been the 8 to 5er. I pick the kids up every day. I know you're involved, but I have been the one to be that stable force. But now the pipeline needs to be manned 24 hours a day. And I'm going to need you to work with me to make some adjustments. Now, he didn't say to me, because you're the woman, you need to stay home and watch the children. What he said is we need to look at what we're doing right now and come together as a team and determine what is the best course of action to make sure that our small children are raised and still be able to make an income for our family. And so that's what we did. I made the decision to come home and take care of my children. I did not intend to start a business. Well, as it would stand, how many of you have what we call a BFF, or a great friend that you work with, that you tell everything, and if you go left, she goes left, or if he goes left, you go left? Anybody have one of those? So my BFF, Maria Main, she and I were both moms with, she had 2 girls, and I had a son and a daughter. We decided that we would quit our jobs on the same day. We were at Hyatt together. We shared an office. We went to Hilton together. She moved over to Hilton and joined me. And the day I said I was going to quit my job, she said, well, I'm going to quit too. And I said, so we both quit. And my very last client actually was my very first client in my business. But I have to tell you another funny story that happened in that transition. That client was the National Association of Minority Automobile Dealers. And during that time of the conference, which was my very last meeting, was the incident in Jasper where James Byrd was killed. And I ended up with my first event planning opportunity in the middle of their conference. Even though I was their convention services manager at the hotel, I had to organize all of the dignitaries for the funeral for James Byrd to take them to Jasper. Now, that wasn't ever intended, but the reason I'm bringing that up to you, and I want you to be aware of it, is a lot of things are connected that you don't know are connected. So this group had as one of their keynote speakers, Jesse Jackson. And at the time, Jesse Jackson, as he tends to do from time to time, was onto the automotive industry at that point for not creating opportunities. And so Toyota and everybody else was sort of under his microscope. He'd already had his fun with Shell and Chevron and all those companies in oil and gas. So he'd moved on to automotive. So he happened to already have been secured as a keynote speaker. Well, since he was already in place, everyone else, from Maxine Waters, who was from California, to every dignitary that was going to come in for this incident, ended up just coming to the hotel where we were. And I remember sharing with my husband a story where I got a phone call from Minister Farrakhan's office, because there were certain hotels that he would go to when he came to Houston. And he laughs at me because I told Minister Farrakhan's people, I said, look, I can't do Jesse and Farrakhan at the same time. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to send you guys on down to Allen Center to manage Farrakhan because I just can't do both. And the reason is because from a security standpoint, Minister Farrakhan, somebody has to cook his food, somebody has to watch him cook it. So there's a lot of things, and for those of you who work in hotels like the Four Seasons and understand, any of these folks who are controversial or any of these folks who are high maintenance, it's like a whole convention in one person. And I'm only one person, so I couldn't do both. So at any rate, that was the story that I ended up with in that business. So I started off sort of backwards going into business. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't plan to be in business. And I just had a client. And oh, by the way, I had a kindergartner. And so I could only work 4 hours a day. So I remember Nissan North America, who was one of my first corporate clients, asking me if I was available for an afternoon meeting. I said, oh no, I can only have a meeting between 8 and 12 because my son gets home from kindergarten at 1. And so that was the running joke back in those days. But as you can see, he finally went to school full time. And then I grew from that one first customer to 6 in the automotive industry and as many as 40 meetings in 2000, which I think was the year that I decided to start scaling back a little bit because I'd gotten in a little bit over my head. But anyway, so running a business, how many of you want to be entrepreneurs? See, it's a lot of you that want to be entrepreneurs. And I run into that with millennials particularly because they are already, after the first month on the job, ready to work for themselves and not want to work with anybody else. And I get it because I have 2 millennials of my own. But running a business has very little to do with the work and everything to do with the business. And that class that I took in 2003, it was all about business finance, knowing how the money comes in, how the money comes out, how to, what you can do and what you can't do, allocating staff, all of those things that had I learned them in 1998, I probably would be a billionaire. But since I didn't, I had to kind of come in it to the back way. Of course, everything has a purpose, but running a business. So before you strike out on your own, learn on somebody else's dime first. Make sure you at least know how to do the work. And then take advantage of all those free resources out there that the Small Business Administration, the business development agencies, that they offer for free to help you know how to actually set up or run a business, how to structure it, whether it's a sole proprietorship or a limited liability corporation. Knowing how to run a business is what you're going to spend most of your time doing rather than actually doing the work. I won't spend a whole lot of time on that because I know that entrepreneurship is a whole nother subject, but just wanted to make sure that you got those main points, is that you need to learn the ins and outs of running a business before you decide to hang your own shingle. And lastly, you need to learn to focus on what matters most. So for me, I mentioned to you that I did family and then business, or family and then career. To me, the most important thing to me is my family. And every decision that I have made in my life, I could not make without thinking of my family first. But also, that translates to knowing what matters when it comes to work. And I'll give you an example of what made me make the biggest change that I made this past 2 years. And that was, and some of my students that are in here have volunteered, or I shouldn't say volunteered, worked with me on projects. And I had a big event for Comcast Corporation, their all-employee meeting, and it was 2,000 plus of their associates from all over the city coming into one location. And we were busing them from 6 different places. And on the day that the meeting was supposed to happen, it was projected that it would be ice and nothing would move. So about Monday, I realized, well, if the meeting is Wednesday and this is Monday, if the storm comes in today and we're prevented from having the meeting, or the storm clears up by Wednesday and we're prevented from having the meeting, that's not a force majeure situation. Does anybody know what force majeure is? So basically what that means is that something beyond your control happens, and so whatever you're doing has to be canceled, and every party walks away from the table with no liability. But if in fact the storm happened the day before, then there's no reason the meeting can't happen the day of. So on Monday, I'm thinking, if the storm comes on Tuesday, we have to have the meeting on Wednesday, otherwise we have to pay. And so the corporations, of course, are thinking, well, we'll use our leverage and our control and our power not to have to pay. I'm like, no, you're going to have to pay. If you cancel a meeting the day before it happens and there's no reason the meeting can't occur, it's got to go on. So long story short, I had 10 students from the Hilton College, and I'm proud to say they all showed up on Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. at NRG to work the meeting that did happen. It came, it went, and without any challenge at all. The meeting was perfect. And we bussed the people in, even though we didn't know whether we were going to be able to see our way to and from each of these locations. We had it all mapped out, we planned, but the meeting had to happen, and it did. But in my personal life, I have a mom who's 86 now with Alzheimer's, and I'm her full-time caregiver. Her caregiver couldn't get to us. So I had to bring Mom with me. And so Mom bundled up, piled her into the car, and fortunately I had one of my team members who knew my mom very well, and she could watch her so that I could allocate a staff person just for Mom, make sure she got her breakfast and she was taken care of. But what it told me is that as a business owner, I'm responsible. And I can't be a full-time caregiver and also be responsible for my mom. So what I had to do was I had to look at all of my local business and make a decision that for now, I need to have another person who's key on that project, maybe even another company that's primary. I'll still continue to work with these groups and be able to support the meetings, but I need to always be able to say I can't leave Mom, or Mom needs to be taken care of. And that was a tough decision to make, but it was what mattered most, my mother's safety and her security. Now that worked out. And my client was very understanding about that. But let's be honest, most clients are not going to understand that. And my mom was in a position where she's mobile and she's communicative, and it wasn't really a problem. In fact, I don't think any of the 2,000 people that were there even knew she was. And to her, it was like an adventure. But it helped me to understand that because I'm focused on my mom, I need to be a consultant for this time period and consult on bigger projects and not take the lead. And then just take the lead on those things where I can be in another city completely dedicated and let somebody like my wonderful husband and my sister take care of my mom. And so that's what, as an example of focusing on what matters. So what advice can I give you about technology, tools, and tips that will help you? Again, I mentioned to you circa 1998. That was before the technology boom rather than before Christ. And so there were no cell phones, no fax machines. We were using floppy disks. Y'all probably don't even know what that is. And so I started my business then. Imagine what I can do now. I'm working in teamwork and base camp where I'm doing collaborative group work. I am using, I have my cell phone, which I'm one of the few people that has a Windows phone. I know everybody has an iPhone, but I need to be able to have the full complement of Windows available to me so that I can work from wherever I am. But all that technology has made it so much more effective for me to be a business owner and to be able to support my clients even when I'm not there. In fact, right now, while I'm in this room, we have a group site, and the group that I work with is able to respond to my emails because I told them I wasn't able to, because all the emails go into a central site in a site called Groove, and somebody from my team can answer the questions while I'm here with you guys. But I tell you what, the personal touch is so important. Hospitality is about people. There's not an app for that, okay? There's not an app for being personable. There's not an app for stopping and taking the time to listen to another person when they're speaking to you. There's not an app for personal communication, writing a thank you note, even if it's just 2 lines, complete sentences, not a text, that let people know how much you appreciate something that they've done. There's not an app for that. And there's also not an app to remind you to think before you move. We get so accustomed to being able to push a button and make things happen that we've forgotten how to think, how to use this brain. And I will tell you, as a caregiver of someone with Alzheimer's, it's very important every day to use your brain, to operate it, to exercise it. But to have that personal touch, I'm proud to say every client that I have has come from a referral. I have never advertised On-Site Partners. You can find us, but it won't be because we advertised. And I'm really proud that my hotel partners recommend me. The latest piece of business that I closed last year for my company for this year was a 3,000 person international conference with people coming from 141 countries where I'll be able to support them in registration, came from the Hilton Americas. And then the Hyatt recommended me to a client for an international meeting for this year to do consulting that I placed at the Westin. And then that same Westin just helped me out this past week with some volunteer work for an event. It's very important to maintain a reputation that's worthy of recommendation, because in business, all you have is your personal touch. All you have is your brand. All you have is you. Now, that doesn't mean that you're perfect and you don't make mistakes. And what I really did learn to accept is there are going to be things that are going to happen in your life and in your career that you have absolutely no control over. You can go about your daily life every day trying to do the right thing, and still things don't work out. But your personal brand gets the greatest tests in adversity. When you can stand and still be the same person and behave and operate in the same way, even in adversity, that speaks to who you are and your integrity. I mentioned a little bit about collaboration, and teamwork makes the dream work. I have so many tools now for working in teams, because I don't know about you, but I get as many as 1,000 emails a day. And that's just on the few projects that I'm currently working on. And I need to be able to program the setup of that system that receives those messages to identify keywords so that they go to the person who can handle it. Because I can't handle 1,000 emails. And no one on my team can do that either. So you need to learn that you can't do everything yourself and that you need support. Also, problem solving is a skill. How many of you are given problems or cases to deal with in class? So problem solving is a skill. If you learn nothing else while you're in school, learn how to solve problems. People are looking to you when they hire you for solutions. They want you to have answers. They're not interested in your take on things. They're not necessarily interested in how you feel about things. They want you to be able to solve problems. Wouldn't you, those who are employees, agree? You need employees in those roles who can solve problems and solve them on the spot, correct? So we need to learn how to solve problems. And then last on this slide, I'll just mention to you, everybody wants to be in a CMP or a CIC or a CAC or whatever, BS. The bottom line is credentials without experience is faith without works. It's great to have all those beautiful letters behind your name, but they mean nothing if you don't know what is necessary to do the work. Also have to learn a little bit about computers too. Decide to pursue success or live a life of purpose. You can have both, but rarely at the same time. Now let me tell you what I mean about that. I mentioned earlier what great company I'm in with Eric's Club. Some of these folks, which, when we retire today to this reception after the lecture, you're going to have an opportunity to meet and spend time with them. Use them as a sponge. Talk to them. Some of these folks are the most successful people in our industry. They have broken down barriers, created pathways, and built bridges for our industry in every way. I'm a meeting planner who happens to own her own business, who gets a chance every day to really live a great life, to be able to have the balance between taking care of my mom, raising a family, running a business, and getting to work with some really cool people. Yes, those cool people may be at the top 50 corporations in the Fortune 500. That's wonderful. But the bottom line for me is every day I get up wanting to live a life of purpose. The most important thing to me is not what I accomplish, how much money I make, and there are different types of business owners, and neither one of them is, none of the types are wrong. It's just about what you are and who you are, and that's what you have to be honest about. So for me, a life of purpose is more important. How many people I can help is more important to me than how much money I can bank. On the other hand, there are people who want to bank, and that's absolutely noble and great, but there are choices in that. Now, if you get like Bill Gates or you get like Warren Buffett, you can make all that money even though that wasn't your original intention, and then you can live the rest of your life, if you're healthy enough, to be able to live a life of purpose, which you see is what they're doing now. But for me personally, when I came along this journey, because I never was really looking to be in business, business was a means to an end rather than an end in itself for me. I've always lived my life as a life of purpose. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there'll be some things that you can't control. We got some control freaks in the room. Let it go now. Learn to deal with that now. As soon as you get on a job and have a boss, you are no longer in control. But I'm here to remind you that when you open your own business, you don't have any control either, because now you rely on those clients to keep your doors open. My husband laughs at me because on some days, I'm trying to figure out, which of these pieces of business do I need to take for what I might need next year? If I make this decision now, how will it impact me in 2017 or 2018? Or should I let this go and focus on this now? So just know that there's a lot of things in life that you can't control. So you just got to let it go and learn how to do that now. Another choice or challenge that I would say to you is to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and then surround yourself with people who challenge you to be better. Since I became a member of Eric's Club 2 years ago, there's one particular person I want to acknowledge, and that's Dorothy Nicholson. She embraced me from day one, and I know we also serve on the Hilton College board together, and we remarked in a joking way that we didn't have to wait in line for the bathroom when we had a break because there were just 3 of us women, and we don't have, so we didn't have the potty parity issue here. But we had a chance recently to share a ride to San Antonio to visit with their board and really get to know each other as people. But I thank Dorothy for embracing me and for the things that, she's a pioneer. And to learn from her, I want to be around people that have more than me, that know more than me, that do more than me, that have survived more than I have. Because otherwise I can't grow. There are 4 women CEOs. We meet on a monthly basis for dinner. One has a company that's worth over $100 million. And the smallest in the bunch is me. It is what it is. But I'm going to get there. But seriously speaking, being with those 4 women has caused me to question everything that I do and every choice I make. Because what I learned is they value me as much as I value them. I'm able to point out to things that they might not know or understand. So you need to realize that you are not living your life in comparison to somebody else. You be the best you, and that has value. And that value is enough. And then you can be comfortable around anybody, whether they have a lot or little. And I think the greatest thing that I've learned how to do is I don't envy another person's position. Many of those folks that John shared in his lecture last time, I used to work at Four Leaf Towers while I was a college student. And I got to meet all of those elite Houstonians that he still works for. Bless you, John. But what I also learned is that their children were lost. They didn't have time for them in some cases. Not everybody. Not everybody. Because there's some good parents and families out there. Don't get me wrong. But my point was, whenever you pursue a life of success, you leave some things to the side. It's a choice. It's a decision. Whatever choices you make. And we each have to make choices that make sense for us. But what those 4 women do is they encourage me to be the best me every single day. We help each other out. There are things that I can do for them because they don't have time to do, because I'm working at home and have a little bit more free time now that I've scaled back. And then on the flip side, if I need a door open for me, they can pick up the phone and call. So surround yourself with people who make you a better person. And then have a plan B for yourself. We all have our 5-year plan and our 3-year plan and our 1-year plan. But what is your plan B if none of that works out? What are you going to do? And what are those people who rely on you and depend on you going to do if things don't turn out the way you expected? So you need to make sure that you have a plan B for your life and for those that you rely on. Now, before I close out my presentation, I just want to make sure to honor my commitment to answer every question that you might have to be tested on. I think I shared with you pretty much most of those things. The one piece I saved for last was I was asked prior to this lecture, what was your first job in the hospitality industry? And that job was working at Plitz Cinema in Waco, Texas at the age of 16. Now, you might say that that was my first hospitality job because I worked at the concession stand before cash registers were being used at the movie theater. And I had to add up all the numbers in my head, so I had to know math. So never think that just because you're in the hotel school that you don't have to be able to add up numbers in your head, because when those checks need to come in, you better be able to add up pretty quickly what those numbers are. But what it actually did wasn't open my doors of opportunity and my thought process as it relates to hospitality. Just recently, I became an advisor to a woman-owned film company called Pantheon of Women. It's a women-centric film company, and they brought me on board, again, these 4 women that I talked about, one of them, to be involved with them in their first movie project. And I did the premiere at South by Southwest this last year. The movie was purchased this year at South by Southwest, and now is going into distribution. So I get to work with Hollywood celebrities, and all of that's fun. But also on a day-to-day basis, I'm involved in their teamwork site and helping them with selecting cast members and providing input on the project and reading scripts and doing focus groups and all these kinds of things. And so actually the Plitt Cinema job was my first exposure to movies, because we got to see movies free. And that experience that I went back, some 40 years to bring in is what I'm using today. And the point that it makes is that every experience that you have in life, no matter what it is and what you do, prepares you for the next stage in your journey. You may not know why it's relevant, and you might table it or put it to the side temporarily, but that experience is there. And you can go back and reach towards it and utilize it. I've mentioned to you already what fuels my passion for this college. It's the students. I'm so proud of all of you and how hard you work. I see actually the traditional generation inside of you. You need not only to do the work, but you need to know why it matters. And I think that's why I get along with you so well and enjoy spending time with you so much, is because you do want to live a life of purpose. And the last piece of advice that I'll leave you with: don't be afraid to move, to pursue your passion, or to quit when it's not working for you. At the end of your life, you don't want to have missed a chance to live fully. My daughter, who is living in D.C., those of us who are parents in the room and parents of college students, we just want you to graduate and get a job and be able to support yourself. Not a lot, just that. So our daughter got situated in Washington, and she got a job. And the first day on the job, they gave her a Mac, they gave her a cell phone, they gave her everything they thought she would need. And 6 months later, she had to get out. It just wasn't working for her. Can you imagine? That call is worse than I can't find a job. I found a job and now I want to quit. But I have to tip my hat to my daughter for having the courage to quit before she invested too much. Now, we'll say she found another job. She's doing great. I'm proud of her. But the point is, that life is short. Back in our days, growing up with our parents would have told us, you need to get somewhere, you need to sit down and be stable, be able to provide for yourself. But this is a different world. You're going to spend 70% of your time either with your work or with the people you work with. And if you don't enjoy it and it's not meaningful for you, get out while the getting is good. Move on to something else. Find the right fit. Don't be afraid to move to another place, to leave some things behind in order to get what it is that you want. Because once you have a family, those decisions are going to be harder to make, because now we're back to the plan B. And what is it you're going to do for those who are depending on you and that salary that you made, for those who are depending on you who are also living in Houston and now you want to move to New York. So keep that in mind while you can. Make the best decisions for yourself now. Be on your own journey. Be neither envious nor enamored with another person's success. Don't judge another person's failures, choices, or challenges through your own lens. We all start from a different place. I started from Orange, Texas, East Texas. I was fortunate that my mother was educated. So those people who didn't have that benefit didn't start from the same place. So how can I feel that I'm better or I'm stronger? No. This was the grace and mercy that God chose to give me, that I have the life that I have, that I'm blessed the way that I'm blessed. And I love this piece because I think it's important. Don't we all want to get back at those people? I'm sure that this is going to be visible to folks who never thought I'd make it. The directors of sales who never, thought that I could do it. even though I did 189% of quota. You know, funny story, those of you who want to be in sales and those of you who worked in sales, typically when you resign from a sales job, they walk you off the property. I had made me stay my 2 weeks. I was planning on that time off. But that speaks to integrity. Very rarely would that happen. That meant that they trusted that I wouldn't abuse the role that I had. So that's why your name can be a good name, it'll be for the good, or it could be to your detriment in a case like that. But the point is that leave revenge to karma. And if you're lucky, God will let you watch. It's been my honor and my privilege to speak to you today. There's one thing that I want to share with you that I think is so wonderful about our industry that has changed. As my friend Joan Eisenstock would say, it's the elephant in the room. I am proud as an African American woman to be standing before you as a member of Eric's Club, as a woman and as an African American. If you look through your book, you'll see there's one other African American that's at Eric's Club currently. But that does not reflect on this college or its commitment to diversity. I want you to be aware of that. This college has been there for me from day one. Even though the world might have felt differently, this college has always embraced me, including my fellow alums. But why it's so important is that diversity is beyond African American and white today. It is people from all over the world that grace this college and make it stronger and make it better. And the University of Houston is proud of its diversity, and we should be too. It's women and men, young and old, strong and growing, that make this a very, very special place to be. And it is your talent, which is diverse, and the tools that are available to you that are being maximized, that make this place great and our place, the United States of America, great for all of us. Thank you for listening, and thank you for allowing me to share my story.
You don't get to run away, Sharmagne. There's 3 things that have to happen. First is I have to give you a big hug. We have a little token here for you. The official plaque to hang on the wall is the Eric Club lecturer, which we hope you will display with proudness and pleasure. And when you get to be ready to retire like I did last week, we've got a chair for you to sit in. So. Personal Eric Club chair. We will deliver it to you and get it to you sometime. You don't have to carry it on your back. So you'll have a place in your house. We all appreciate it. God bless you. I want to also express our gratitude to the senior faculty members of the dean who is here, and our founder, Mr. Cole, is somewhere right there in front as usual. I'd like to thank all of you students for your attention and your input, and go Cougs. Thank you.